Hello everyone and welcome back to another day of hopelessly wishing for Halo Infinite news. June 7th, 2020 has officially come and gone, meaning in a different world, we would have finally gotten the big Halo Infinite reveal. F's in the chat, boys. And while we wallow in our own sorrows thinking of what could have been, we do know that Microsoft is holding some sort of online event in July to show off its first-party games. Unfortunately, there is no official date yet, which just adds to our hopelessness and despair. But never fear, one day in the next month and a half or so, Cortana will come again, bearing Halo Infinite gameplay. However, until then, there's a problem plaguing the gaming franchises throughout the industry that I would like to discuss. And that would be remade or remastered maps. This crossed my mind over the past few months of playing Modern Warfare, as they've been periodically adding remade maps from older games with each season of content. Halo is no stranger to remaking or reimagining maps throughout the franchise. At face value, Remaking Maps seems like a no-brainer. The players get a map that they already know and love, and the developers get to copy-pasta an old map, giving them one less map they need to come up with a design for. I wouldn't say easy, but it's an easier job for developers, and players get to enjoy a quick mental escape from their shitty lives now to a time when their lives still sucked, but at least all your friends were playing Halo. I enjoy hopping into a familiar play space in a new game and already knowing power weapon spawns and how to maneuver around the map. But I think there are a couple negative issues that are overlooked with remade maps. For one, even though remade and remaster maps are nostalgia bait, it seems like it's rare that you get a one-to-one clone. It feels like developers change the map not to improve it, but just so people don't point fingers at developers for being lazy. It's change for the sake of change, and kinda just gives players nostalgic blue balls. Like, here's this old map that everyone loves, and you hop in and it's so close, but just not quite there. For example, Lockout from Halo 2 was brought into Halo 3 as Guardian, which was sort of a spiritual successor. It was similar to Lockout, but different enough where you look at it as its own map. It wasn't marketed as being a remake of Lockout, so I personally never looked at it as Lockout. I looked at it as Guardian, its own thing. But then they did a remake of Lockout in Halo 3 via DLC, and it was called Blackout. It was almost the same map, but they changed a bunch of sightlines and jumps you can do, which really took away from the ability to sneak up and surprise people that were in power positions. Removing these jumps made the map play completely different, and in my opinion made it less appealing. Now let's look at Halo 2's Midship. It was remade as a part of Halo 3 DLC in the form of Heretic. This was a one-to-one remake and I really enjoyed it. Then in Halo Reach, they marketed Zealot as a successor to Midship, but in reality the only thing they really had in common was that they're both purple. I wasn't a fan of Zealot for various reasons, but that's besides the point. It had nothing to do with it being deemed a successor to Midship, but the fact that they marketed it that way really makes no sense to me. In Halo 5 there was another successor to Midship, in Truth. The map was laid out the same as Midship other than a few minor changes, but the map was elongated to account for the advanced mobility mechanics added in Halo 5. Every walkway feels like they took Midship and inserted it into one of your nightmares where you're running down a hallway and the door just keeps getting further and further away. I don't necessarily think it's a huge problem that Midship was remade in Halo 5. I enjoyed the map overall, but what purpose does it actually serve? It's similar, but it's still very different with the new movement mechanics. It just feels kind of gimmicky in my opinion. A marketing pitch more than a positive addition to the game. And this leads to my bigger problem. Remade or remastered maps are just a crutch. Every new Halo game, they bring back old favorites. But when is the last new original Halo map that was universally beloved in the franchise as a whole? For me personally, maybe Coliseum in Halo 5? It was definitely my favorite map in the game, but I'm not sure I would put it up alongside Blood Gulch or Construct or Midship or all the other great maps in Halo history. Looking back to Halo 4, I guess you could argue Haven was a great map. It was the only map I liked in Halo 4. But it's hard for me to really say any of Halo 4's maps were that good solely because I just didn't like the game that much. And do we even want to bother with Halo Reach's maps? You could argue that there hasn't been a great Halo map since Halo 3 came out almost 13 years ago. I'm not saying that this is due to remade and remastered maps, but I think that developers use them as a crutch to fall back on if the maps they design fall flat. It's like an insurance policy hedging against their own incompetence. Personally, I would just like to see some new maps that I can enjoy in Halo Infinite. Not some very similar but not quite clones of maps that I've spent thousands of hours on already. There's another trend that coincides with the lackluster maps in the Halo series, and that being sprint or advanced mobility that was introduced in Halo Reach. It seems to be agreed upon that it is objectively harder to design maps for games that include advanced mobility. And from Halo Reach onward, seeing as there are different movement speeds, and in the case of Halo 5, clambering ledges, maybe the difficulty of designing universally beloved maps for a game with sprint and other movement mechanics is proving too difficult for 343. If sprint is the issue, unfortunately for us, it doesn't seem like Halo is going to move away from sprint or advanced mobility. I guess anything is possible, but I definitely wouldn't bet on it. Sprint seems to be something that 343 isn't willing to go back on now that it has become a staple in the franchise. If you think about it, there are now as many Halo games with sprint than without it. 1, 2, and 3 don't have sprint, Reach 4 and 5 do have sprint. Unfortunately for the developers, if sprint is an issue in designing maps, this just isn't our problem. Sprint or no sprint, Halo Infinite needs to reverse the current trend of lackluster maps in the franchise. And with Halo being in its current state of irrelevancy, 343 is under more pressure than ever to deliver a flawless Halo experience.